It's funny that you ask. Well, maybe not funny, but interesting. Because only a few days ago I was reminded of my first encounter with the works of Poe. I was in 3rd or 4th grade, so it must have been either 8 or 9. And we were reading The Telltale Heart, in a German translation, of course. Or maybe it was read to us. I can't quite remember. I don't even know if we were actually told the name of the author. Well, we probably were. But if so, that information obviously went straight into one ear and out of the other. Because even back then I had no interest in people. However, I only mention this because even though I did not care who the author was, the story itself, or rather images that it created in my head, they left a deep impression on me, and I was strangely attracted to the story. I felt there was an enormous power behind it. But since I was young, I didn't really understand the connection. I didn't know why I felt the way I felt. The images, however, that were conjured up that day, they never left me. I still remember them. So flash forward a few years. At the age of 12, when my depression started to become heavier, and I thought of suicide as an option for the first time, and sort of gradually drew the cloak of darkness around me, if you wish, and slowly descended into the world of shadows. And in the course of that, I tried to find solace in the world of classical, fantastic literature. And you cannot imagine my relief, that sense of destiny, if you wish, when I discovered that someone I had already encountered had actually been waiting for me there all the time. Would Poe be the perfect reflection of your soul? This may be an embarrassing thing to admit, but honestly, I have no idea how right you are. When I began to work on Poetica, I approached the poems from the outside, if you know what I mean. I met them like old friends or acquaintances, ghosts I had already encountered in the past. But when the album was completed, and that's actually the embarrassing part, I had completely forgotten that those words had originally been written by a different person. I felt like they were my own. I had made them my own. In fact, I felt more like Sopor than Sopor did. If that makes any sense to you. So I didn't just adapt them to music. I adapted them to myself. There is a sound, a sort of funeral whistling that comes often in your music, especially since Children of the Corn, for instance on Dreamland, or the wonderful The Haunted Palace. Oh, thank you. It makes me think of old horror movies. Are those movies getting a growing influence in your work? I know what you mean. That's the old theremin. the sound is almost synonymous with all black and white science fiction horror movies, yes. It's a sort of instrument you literally expect to hear when you think of these films. And I can't deny that I'm actually very fond of it. I've always been. It suits me perfectly. Aside from the also eerie atmosphere it creates, it's also a lovely bridge between the coldness of the synthesizer and the warmth of the violins. It combines, it balances the extremes, and that's what I'm all about. Do you like the movie The Oblong Box with Vincent Price and Christopher Lee? That's the only Poe story that you interpret, which is not a poem but a story. To be honest, I can't remember it. I know that I've watched it, but it obviously didn't leave any impression on me, otherwise I would remember it. Unlike Roger Corman's adaptation of The Fall of the House of Usher, also with the divine Vincent Price in dark velvet and bleached hair, and generally divine and beautiful and breathtaking. In fact, I would go so far as to say that that is my favourite Poe adaptation. That one definitely had a lasting impression on me to this very day. Was it hard to choose the poems that you would put to music? No. And yes. And no. Where shall I begin? Okay. When you listen to Harvest Moon, which is the last track on Children of the Corn, you can hear that there's a distinct De Lava Sarabande vibe in the string section. Well, maybe you can't hear it because it's rather short and there's a lot of stuff going on. But it is there. Take my word for it. Well, actually, I can play it for you. Wait a second. So, this is the kind of mood I was in when the album closed, when I finished it. So, after I had finished Children of the Corn, I had this feeling that I really needed to go and clean up my house, as in to revisit old recordings that I'd never been happy with. Those that still carried an importance and that were still relevant to me, those I still felt a connection with. And naturally the first thing that came to mind were the Poe adaptations. And most of all, Alone, from that unlistenable piece of shit Spiral Travel album. God, I hate that thing. But that's public knowledge. I'm allowed to say that. I did it. You see, my initial idea was to do me a 12-inch single with The Sleep on one side, maybe, and Alone and Dreamland on the other. But then suddenly Alone had a twin brother, and on top of that my label suggested I should do a 7-track mini album instead of a 12-inch single, so I thought, what the hell, and redid all the Poe tracks. When you're still in the early stages of an album, things tend to be vague, and you're not always sure in what direction the album wants to go. You're not quite certain of its purpose, but as you work on it, things always become clearer gradually. And so after a while I realised that Poetica in fact wanted to be an album, and for this I needed more material. So initially, on a conscious level, that was the only reason why I was looking for further poems to put the music. But naturally I just couldn't pick anything at random. There had to be a connection. And a dream within a dream, of course, was an obvious choice. And the only other two poems I could think of doing were The Haunted Palace and The City in the Sea. And the funny thing about City in the Sea was that I had never really read it before. I mean, yes, I did read it once or twice, but only cursory, and as a consequence, I'd never really understood it. Also because, in my memory, it had blended together with Jacques Tourneur's film The City Under the Sea, also with Vincent Price. Which I guess is why I always believe that the poem describes sort of ghostly submarine habitat. What a joke. And with The Haunted Palace it was similar, even though it's actually part of my all-time favourite Poe story, the masterpiece, which is The Fall of the House of Usher. I was never really aware of it. Again, yes, I had read it a few times on its own, but because of my careless reading, I actually believed that the poem was about a haunted building. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Can you believe it? However, when the album was finished, The Haunted Palace turned out to be the one song that actually makes me shiver. It still does. And when I listen to the album in one sitting, the very moment the song ends and the first notes of the last song begin, I start to cry every time. So when I began working on Poetica, the poems and I were merely like friends or acquaintances. But when I was finished, we had become one.